The Undertaker of Raven Hollow. The year was 1867 in the small, rain-soaked village of Raven Hollow, where the trees twisted like gnarled fingers and the mist never seemed to lift. There was an Undertaker named Edgar Grimm. He was a tall, gaunt man with a face so pale it seemed carved from marble. His eyes, a dull gray, reflected no light, and his voice was little more than a whisper on the wind. It was said he had been there longer than anyone could remember, and yet he never seemed to age. His funeral parlor stood at the edge of the village, just before the old cemetery. It was a place of dark wood and heavy drapes, a house that seemed to wallow in its own sorrow. No one ever saw him purchase supplies, but his coffins were always well crafted and polished to an unnatural sheen. No one saw him hire grave diggers, and yet the graves were always ready when needed. The villagers were wary and more than a little afraid of him. They whispered amongst themselves about him in hushed tones, especially after dark. Some claimed he could speak with the dead, others that he had made a pact with forces beyond comprehension. None dared to ask too much of him. Edgar Grimm was not a man who welcomed questions. One stormy evening, a newcomer arrived in Raven Hollow. His name was Thomas Carver, a traveling journalist investigating Old English folklore. He had heard of Raven Hollow's peculiar Undertaker and was determined to uncover the truth behind the local legends. Taking a room at the village inn, Thomas wasted no time in making inquiries of the infamous Undertaker, Mr. Grimm. The innkeeper, an elderly woman named Mrs. Calderwell, warned him against prying into matters best left alone. "Grimm's not a man like the rest of us," she muttered, refilling his tankard with dark ale. "There's something wrong about him." But Thomas, ever the skeptic, dismissed her words as superstition. That night, he walked the cobbled streets to the Undertaker's parlor, its windows aglow with flickering candlelight. The door, carved with intricate, mysterious symbols, creaked open before he could knock. A gust of cold air ushered him in. Its icy grip led him inside the dark study. Edgar Grimm stood behind a heavy wooden desk, his skeletal fingers idly tapping the surface. He regarded Thomas with an unfathomable expression, as if he already knew why he had come.
"I expected you sooner," the Undertaker murmured. Thomas hesitated. "You know who I am?" Grimm nodded. "Men like you are always drawn to places like this." Thomas straightened his shoulders. "I came to learn the truth about you." A long silence followed, broken only by the slow ticking of an unseen clock. Then Grimm smiled, a thin, bloodless smile. "Truth is a heavy burden, Mr. Carver. Are you certain you wish to carry it?" The journalist hesitated, but nodded in the Undertaker's direction. Grimm turned towards a coffin resting on a table behind him at the rear of the study, its lid slightly ajar. "Then you must witness what I am." A sickly sweet scent filled the air. Thomas stepped forward and peered inside, expecting a corpse. Instead, he saw himself. Pale, lifeless, dressed in funeral attire. The sickly sweet scent stuck to the insides of his nostrils and made him light-headed. He stumbled back, heart hammering. "What trickery is this?" "No trickery." Grimm's voice was barely above a whisper. "A revelation. I do not prepare the dead, Mr. Carver. I prepare the dying." A creeping horror settled over Thomas as the realization took hold. "No, I am alive." Grimm merely gestured to a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. Thomas turned, his breath rasping. His reflection was fading, his form becoming translucent. He tried to steady his swaying frame, but his fingers passed through the desk beside him as though he were mist. "You see," Grimm murmured, "you have already left the realm of the living.
I do not summon death, I merely ease the transition. Thomas's mind reeled, memories returning in fragments. The rain-soaked road, the blinding flash of lightning slicing the stormy night sky, and the deafening thunder. He recalled the startled horse, the coach veering off course, the sensation of falling, of tumbling. He heard and felt the sickening cracking of his own bones and the ripping of his flesh together with the smell and taste of the blood in his nose and mouth. Then, inevitably, the sharp and devastating impact of his shattered body on rocks and solid stone far below. Finally, he felt the cold and the silence, the awful, deathly silence. Carver staggered another step or two backwards, as if he'd been dealt a heavy blow by a muscle-bound pugilist. He rocked back and forth on the thick study carpet, his knees slightly quivering and his lungs gasping for air. It was all so clear to him now. He had been dead since he arrived. The Undertaker reached out to him with a skeletal hand. "Rest now, Mr. Carver." As Grimm's hand pressed against Carver's heaving chest, darkness enveloped him. The next morning, in the village of Raven Hollow, people whispered once more, but none dared to question what had become of Thomas Carver. In the funeral parlour, Edgar Grimm waited, as he always had, for the next lost soul to find their way to him.